Yuri Kochiyama. The Japanese-American civil rights activist Yuri Kochiyama was born and raised in San Pedro, California. She and her family were among the 120,000 Japanese Americans on the West Coast who were rounded up in a wave of anti-Japanese hysteria that followed the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Here she recalls her experiences in the detention camps.
I was red, white, and blue when I was growing up. I taught Sunday school and was very, very American. I was also very provincial. We were just kids rooting for our high school. I was 19 at the time of the evacuation. I just finished junior college. I was looking for a job and didn't realize how different the school world was from the work world. In the school world, I never felt racism. But when you get into the work world, it was very difficult. This was 1941, just before the war. I finally did get a job at a department store, but for us back then it was a big thing, because I don't think they had ever hired an Asian in a department store before. I tried because I saw a Mexican friend who got a job there. Everything changed for me on the day Pearl Harbor was bombed. On that very day, December 7th, the FBI came and they took my father. He had just come home from the hospital the day before. For several days we didn't know where they had taken him. Then we found out that he was taken to the federal prison at Terminal Island. Overnight, things changed for us. Most Japanese Americans had to give up their jobs, whatever they did, and were told they had to leave. The edict for 9066, President Roosevelt's edict for evacuation, was in February 1942. We were moved to a detention center that April. We were sent to the Assembly Center in Arcadia, California. It was the largest assembly center on the West Coast, having nearly 20,000 people. There were some smaller centers with about 600 people. All along the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, California, there were many, many assembly centers, but ours was the largest. Most of the assembly centers were either fairgrounds or racetracks, so many of us lived in stables, and they said you could take what you could carry. I was so red, white, and blue, I couldn't believe this was happening to us. America would never do a thing like that to us. This is the greatest country in the world. So I thought, this is only going to be for a short while, maybe a few weeks or something, and they will let us go back. At the beginning, no one realized how long this would go on. I didn't feel the anger that much because I thought maybe this was the way we would show our love for our country, and we should not make too much fuss or noise. We should abide by what they asked of us. I'm a totally different person now than I was back then. I was naive about so many things. The more I think about, the more I realize how little you learn about American history. It's just what they want you to know. We always called the camps relocation centers while we were there. Now we feel it is apropos to call them concentration camps. It is not the same as the concentration camps of Europe. Those we feel were death camps. Concentration camps were a concentration of people placed in an area and disempowered and disenfranchised. So it is apropos to call what I was in a concentration camp. Historically, Americans have always been putting people behind walls. First, there was the American Indians who were put on reservations, Africans in slavery, their lives on the plantations, Chicanos doing migratory work and the kinds of camps they lived in, and even too, the Chinese when they worked on the railroad camps where they were almost isolated, dispossessed people, disempowered. And I feel those are the things we should fight against, so they won't happen again. This whole period of what the Japanese went through is important. If we can see the connections of how often this happens in history, we can stem the tide of these things happening again by speaking out against them.